You'll hear people say, school mothers are like your big sisters. But what happens when your school mother becomes the person you're most afraid of? What happens when the protector becomes the predator? This story will shake you and maybe, just maybe, open your eyes to the dark sides of boarding schools. I remember how it all started. It was the exact moment that fateful day in Aba, Abia State, Nigeria, when the letter came. My mother had just returned from the market, her wrapper soaked with sweat. The sun in Aba had no pity that day. She walked into our compound waving a brown envelope above her head, shouting, "Ngozi, your God has done it oh." I dropped the broom I was using to sweep the veranda and ran to her. "Queen's Unity Boarding School Enugu has admitted you." I stared at her, heart pounding. That school was elite. A place for the children of politicians, pastors, rich and influential people. How did I get in? It was our pastor, Daddy Kalu, who said I should write the scholarship exam. He said it was a good school where I would be taught both in character and in learning without distraction from boys if I was privileged to get in. My parents loved the idea, I did too. My mother danced under the mango tree like a woman possessed. My father said it was the best thing that had ever happened to our family. And for me, it felt like an escape. A way out of our average neighborhood. A chance to become somebody in life. But I didn't know. I didn't know that behind those iron gates, my life would change forever. I arrived at Queen's Unity College, Enugu, with my box in one hand and my father and mother's warnings in the other. This place is not your house. Do not be loud. Do what they say, don't make enemies, they said. The compound was big. Trees everywhere. Old buildings with red-painted bricks and cracked windows. Girls in green and white uniforms moved like they'd lived here all their lives. I was only 13. My hair in freshly plaited lines that my mother made sure came out how she wanted before we left the salon woman shop beside our house in Aba. She was very precise when she gave her direction for the hairstyle.
"I want my daughter to look like one of those budded children of rich people."
Orientation was short. The matron, a wide woman with tired eyes, stood before us.
"You are now children of this school. We have rules. No stubbornness. No noise at night. No missing morning devotion. If you break the rules, your school mother will correct you."
School mother. That was the first time I heard the term, and like fate had been arranged by hand, Senior Judith was assigned to me, my school mother. Next, the senior girl barked. Name? Ngozi Kiamaka. The girl checked her list. You've been assigned to Senior Judith, SS3 Blue. She's one of our best prefects. Another senior girl led me to her dorm. She was sitting by her bunk, legs crossed, eyes glued to a novel. She didn't look up when I entered. "This is your school daughter," the girl announced. Senior Judith looked at me like I was a fly on her wall. Her skin was smooth like butter, her voice like warm milk. "What's your name?" "Ngozi." You look like someone who cries a lot." I shook my head quickly. "No, senior." She smiled and stood. She was tall, commanding, and wore her badge like royalty. She cupped my chin gently. "We're going to be close, you and I, very close." Senior Judith was everything I thought a school mother should be. She woke me up for morning prayers. She gave me bread when mine finished. She told the other seniors not to bully me. At night, we would sit on her bed, and she would brush my hair and ask me about my dreams. Senior Judith was kind, always there to listen, and full of wisdom. She became my mentor, the one I could always rely on. She had this warm, motherly way about her, making me feel special every time she smiled at me. She took me under her wing, calling me her baby, a nickname that felt like a badge of honor. I was finally someone's special girl in a world that often felt too big and cold. At first, it was nothing but kind words, advice about school, and the occasional embrace of comfort. She'd sit next to me, whispering how lucky I was to have her guidance, how I was destined for greatness. I believed her, but I didn't know then that the attention she gave me would begin to blur the lines of friendship and something darker. As the weeks passed, Senior Judith's attention grew more constant. She'd find small reasons to be near me, always pulling me into her space, always smiling as though she understood things I didn't. "Come sit next to me, baby," she'd say. Her words seemed innocent, but something in her tone made me feel different. The way she'd touch my arm, or hold me a little longer than necessary. It started to feel strange, but I wasn't sure why. She'd often whisper late into the night, telling me about her experiences, life lessons, and how she could guide me through the struggles I hadn't even experienced yet. I was overwhelmed by how much she cared. She became my constant, my protector. But there was a tension growing between us, and I could feel it. Sometimes, when I'd look at her, there was something in her eyes, a look that made me uncomfortable, but I'd shake it off. She was just looking out for me, wasn't she? By the time the term was halfway through, I couldn't imagine life without Senior Judith. She was more than a friend or a mentor. She had become someone I leaned on, someone I trusted completely. She would spend long hours with me, talking about life, school, and even my family. Each conversation seemed to grow more personal, and I began to confide in her about things I hadn't shared with anyone else. I told her my fears, my dreams, my insecurities. And she listened, always nodding, always reassuring me that she understood. But there were moments when I caught her looking at me too closely, like she was trying to see inside my soul. Those moments felt like more than just caring. They felt like an invitation, an unspoken promise that maybe she wanted something deeper. But I never dared ask. Instead, I just let the feeling linger. It wasn't until one late evening that I began to realize how much power Senior Judith held over me. Light out had passed. The hostel was quiet, only whispers and creaks in the dark. Senior Judith called me to her bed, like she had many times before. But tonight, something was different. There was a heaviness in the air, an unspoken tension that made my heart race. "Lie down beside me," she said, her voice softer than usual. I walked over to her bed, unsure of what to expect. But as soon as I sat down, she pulled me closer. I hesitated. "Don't be afraid. Just for tonight." I laid down beside her. She wrapped her arm around me, stroking my shoulder gently. "You're warm," she whispered. Then her hand went lower to my hip. I tensed. "Relax," she said, kissing my forehead. "I'm just keeping you safe." There was no denying it. The way her arm brushed against mine, the way her fingers lingered on my skin, it was more than friendly. It felt possessive. I wanted to pull away, but I didn't. I was too scared. Scared of what might happen if I did, scared of what would happen if I didn't. She didn't touch me further that night, but I couldn't sleep. My body was with her, but my spirit had stepped outside the hostel, standing by the mango tree, wondering what was happening. The days that followed felt like a blur. Senior Judith would pull me aside more frequently, always with kind words, always with a promise of protection. But I could feel something shifting between us. I wasn't sure what it was, but it felt like she was starting to control everything I did. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was doing something wrong by just being near her. She'd tell me that no one understood me the way she did, that I could trust her with everything. And somehow, that made me feel like I couldn't escape. Every time she called me, I dodged. Every time she smiled, I looked away in shame. I was trapped in a web of strange affection, and I didn't know how to untangle myself. One afternoon, after a long day of classes, she pulled me aside once again. Her usual gentle tone had been replaced with something more urgent, something almost desperate. "Why do you always run from me?" she asked, her voice low and soft. "Don't you trust me anymore?" I didn't know how to answer. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. I had always trusted her, hadn't I? But now, the thought of being alone with her, of letting her in, felt suffocating. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. I don't know what's happening anymore." She smiled, but this time it wasn't reassuring. It was predatory. "There's nothing to be sorry for, baby. I'm here to protect you, to guide you. No one else understands you the way I do." The next day, Senior Judith invited me to her room again. I hesitated, my mind racing with thoughts of what had happened before, but something inside me told me to go. I didn't know what else to do. When I entered her room, She was sitting on the bed, waiting for me, as if nothing had changed. Her eyes were soft, but there was a certain intensity in them, a hunger that made me feel uneasy. "Come here, baby," she whispered, patting the spot next to her on the bed. "You're the only one I can count on. Don't you know that?" I sat down next to her, but my body tensed. My heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted to get up to run, but I didn't. I felt trapped, like I couldn't escape even if I tried. It wasn't long before I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront her. I couldn't continue living in this twisted version of reality where everything was a game, where I was nothing more than a pawn in her manipulative world. That afternoon, I found myself standing in front of her door. My hands were shaking, my heart racing, but I couldn't turn back now. I knocked. She opened the door with a smile, but this time, I saw something different in her eyes. There was no warmth, no affection, just control. "Senior Judith, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice trembling. She stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. I walked in hesitantly, but the moment I crossed the threshold, the door closed behind me. "You wanted to talk, baby?" she asked, her voice too sweet. It felt like poison, slowly seeping into my mind. "Yes," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "What is happening between us? Why do you make me feel like this?" She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Because you need me. You've always needed me, and you always will. I'm the only one who truly understands you." I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. "No, this isn't right. I thought I could get away. I thought I could escape the web Senior Judith had trapped me in. But she wasn't going to let me go that easily." The next few days were a blur. Senior Judith grew more possessive, more controlling. She'd find ways to corner me, to remind me that I was hers. Every time I tried to resist, she pulled me back in with her soft words and false promises. One night, when I was lying awake in my bed, she came to me, slipping through the shadows like a ghost. "Don't move," she whispered. "You're mine. I'm showing you love." When I whimpered, she shushed me with a kiss to my cheek. I froze. She continued. "Why are you fighting me, baby?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You belong with me. Don't you feel it?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I felt numb as she made me do things to her I can't speak about. But deep down, I knew I couldn't stay trapped in this world any longer. I had to get out. I had to free myself from her grip. But how? How do you escape someone who has already taken everything from you? If you've ever been to a Nigerian boarding school, then you'll know that news travels faster than electricity. Whispers spread like wildfire, from the dorms to the dining hall, from the bathroom queues to the chapel. So when I started avoiding Senior Judith, people noticed. The stares began. So did the subtle jabs. "Junior lover," one of the girls muttered under her breath one morning as I passed. Another asked, "You date form Virgin Mary now, ABI?" I was stunned, humiliated. I hadn't told anyone what was happening. But somehow they knew, or at least they thought they did. What hurt the most was that instead of helping, they mocked me. Even my dorm mates gave me space like I was carrying shame on my head. And Senior Judith? She acted like everything was normal. She still waved at me in public, smiled like nothing had changed. But in private, her eyes grew darker, colder. One day during prep, our English teacher, Miss Kemi, noticed I hadn't turned in my essay. She called me aside after class and asked what was wrong. For a brief moment, I thought of telling her. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How do you tell your teacher that a senior girl, respected by all, was hurting you in ways that left no bruises, but made you feel dirty inside? "Are you being bullied?" she asked softly. I nodded. That part was true, but I couldn't say more. Fear sat in my throat like Gary soaked without sugar. She sighed and said she'd keep an eye on things. But in boarding school, keeping an eye on things doesn't mean much, especially when seniors clean toilets and cook for teachers during visiting days. I left her office wishing she had seen everything, wishing she had pulled the full truth out of me. I learned something in boarding school. Silence can be a weapon, but it's also a shield. I started to avoid Senior Judith completely. I skipped meals to miss her at the dining hall. I pretended to have cramps to stay back during Sunday service, just to breathe. But you can't hide for long in a place where every space is shared. One night, she caught me alone at the back of the hostel while I was fetching water. I froze. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking at me. Then she said, "So this is how you'll repay me? After everything I did for you?" I wanted to scream that I never asked for any of it, that I just wanted to be left alone. But all I could say was, "Please, I don't want any trouble." She laughed. That cold, sharp laugh that still rings in my ears. "You've already got trouble," she whispered and walked away. The next day was visiting day. Visiting day. The one day when school smells different, like jollof rice, bottled malt, and hope. My parents came, smiling and eager. My mom gave me a long hug and held my face in her palms. "You've lost weight, Ngozi. Are you okay?" I nodded quickly. Too quickly. My dad joked, "They're working you hard here, eh?" I laughed, fake, dry laughter. As we sat on the lawn under the mango tree, I looked around. Other students were hugging their siblings, stuffing meat pies into their mouths, and snapping pictures. Me? I was watching time like it was running away, watching senior Judith from afar. She sat with her parents too, smiling like an angel. When my mom asked if there was anything I needed, I almost said, "I need to leave this place. I need to be safe." But instead I said, "Golden Morn," and Vaseline, the blue one. Things were back to normal again at the hostel. I needed somewhere to breathe, somewhere to scream without sound. That's when I started writing. At first, I used random pieces of paper hidden inside my Bible. I wrote about the first night she touched me, about how my body froze, about the shame that followed. Then I got a small notebook and covered it with old newspaper so it looked like rubbish. I called it my prayer book in case anyone found it. But inside, it held the real me, broken, confused, angry. I wrote about how I felt like my body wasn't mine anymore. How even when she didn't touch me, I still felt her hands all over. How I hated that no one saw anything. Each word I wrote felt like peeling off a rotten layer. Painful but freeing. One evening, I slipped into the chapel when nobody was there. The candles were out, the pews were cold, but it felt like the only safe place left. I stood before the altar and whispered everything. Not to God. Not exactly. I was just speaking, trying to remove the lump in my throat that never went away. I didn't want it. I didn't like it. I didn't ask for it. Please make it stop. My voice cracked. I bent down and wept. Silent tears. Hot ones. The kind that don't fall from sadness, but from betrayal. I stayed there for over an hour. No teacher came. No student noticed. That chapel soaked my secrets and said nothing back. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. But it didn't stop. It happened again. It happened one afternoon during siesta. I had barely closed my eyes when I felt her shadow beside my bunk again. This time, I didn't fight. I just lay there, frozen. Empty, like a shell. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. And that's what scared me the most. I was getting used to it. That night, I stared at my reflection in the mirror above the wash basin. I didn't recognize the girl looking back. Her eyes were dull. Her lips cracked. Her shoulders slouched. I touched my own skin and recoiled like it wasn't mine. That's when I realized my body had stopped fighting because my mind had already given up. I finally opened up to someone. It wasn't a teacher. It wasn't my mother. It was a girl named Uju, another junior student who had been moved into our dorm. She had kind eyes and a small, careful voice. One night, after lights out, she whispered, "Why don't you talk to anyone?" I don't know what made me answer. Maybe it was her softness. Or maybe I was just tired of carrying it alone. I told her everything in hushed tones under the blanket. Every shameful memory, every silent cry. She held my hand and didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "You're not dirty. She is." That was the first time I heard those words, and they broke something open in me, like light cracking through a boarded-up window. The next day, I avoided Judith like a plague. I didn't smile. I didn't obey her calls. I didn't even look her in the eye. And she noticed. After prep that night, she cornered me by the water tank. "So now you're forming bold, girl." Her voice wasn't calm anymore. It was sharp, angry. I stood there shaking, but I didn't speak. "Let me warn you," she said. "If you open your mouth, you'll regret it." Then she grabbed my arm. That's when Uju appeared, out of nowhere, and said, "Leave her alone." Judith paused, looked between us, then hissed and walked away. It wasn't a fight, but in boarding school, that was war. Even after telling Uju and having her stand up for me in front of Judith, the guilt didn't go away. If anything, it got heavier. Every time I walked past the school clinic, I thought of other girls like me. I wondered if someone else was crying into their pillow, because no one believed them. One day, we had a talk in the hall. A woman came to speak about sexual purity. She talked about how girls needed to keep themselves and avoid tempting boys. I sat there burning. She didn't know that sometimes it's not about tempting anyone. Sometimes you're just a child. Sometimes the devil doesn't come wearing trousers. Sometimes she wears your school uniform and calls herself senior prefect. But I said nothing. Again. The next day was a Wednesday afternoon. We were lined up for inspection behind the hostel. I was doing what I'd mastered, keeping my face blank, shoulders straight, lips sealed. But as the school matron passed, she stopped beside me. She touched my chin gently and lifted my face. "You're too lean," she said. "Are you sick?" I shook my head, but she kept looking at me. That deep, heavy kind of looking, the kind that feels like it can see past your skin. Then she said, "Come to the clinic after dining. Just you. No excuses." I nodded slowly. My throat was dry. I didn't even know if I'd go. But that was the first time in weeks that someone looked at me like I mattered. That evening, I went to the clinic. The matron was waiting. She checked my weight, my arms, asked if I had malaria. I shook my head again and again. She kept scribbling. Then, softly, she said, "Has anyone been touching you?" My throat tightened. My heart started to race. I looked away. She repeated it, slower this time. "You can tell me. I promise you won't be in trouble." I wanted to lie. I had my lie ready. "No, Ma. I'm just dressed." But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Just tears. Silent at first, then loud. I cried like I'd been holding my breath for months. And she just held me. She didn't ask again. She just stayed. The next day, the matron called me into her office. She handed me a pen and a plain, white sheet. "Write it," she said. "In your words. No pressure. Just truth." My hands shook, but I began. I wrote everything. From the first night Judith climbed my bunk, to the threats, to the pain that had buried itself in my skin. This time, I didn't hide it. I didn't tear it. I handed it over. And for the first time since it all began, I exhaled. That single letter didn't just tell my truth. It carried it, out of the darkness, into the light. After I submitted that letter, something inside me shifted. I wasn't healed. No. But I was no longer hiding. The matron promised to call my mother. "She has to hear this," she said. "She needs to come down." That evening, I packed my things, expecting to go home. I sat outside the sickbay waiting. I waited through dinner, through lights out, but the call didn't come. Instead, 2 women from the admin block walked into the clinic and whispered something to the matron. Their voices were low, but I heard enough. "Let's manage this quietly. We can't afford to let this get out and ruin the school's reputation." I was not shocked, just tired. The next morning, I was summoned to the principal's office. The matron was there, the vice principal, and Judith. Judith stood tall, arms folded. No shame, no fear. The principal cleared his throat. "We've read your letter." A very serious accusation. He looked me dead in the eye. "Are you sure you're not exaggerating?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. Then Judith spoke. She said I was a lesbian, that I had always looked at her somehow. and that she had only warned me to stop, and I told her I'd frame her to the school for it. I laughed. A dry, bitter laugh. It sounded like someone else. They told us both to write statements, then send us back to class. No suspension. No punishment. Just silence. That was when I knew justice wasn't coming from the school. By lunchtime, the whispers had started. They say she's possessed. I heard she likes girls. No wonder she's always quiet. I moved through the corridors like a shadow. People stared, pointed. Some laughed. Others avoided me. My safe spaces were gone. Even Uju became cold. She didn't say a word to me that day. Not one. I became the scandal. The one with bad spirit. The one who was ruining a senior's future. That night, I sat on my bunk and watched Judith laughing with her friends like nothing had happened. And I realized sometimes when you tell the truth, you bleed even more. I thought it was over, that my voice had dissolved into the walls of that school forever. But something happened. A week later, the matron came to the hostel with a paper in her hand. Her face pale, eyes wide. "Who gave you access to a phone?" she snapped. I was confused. "Phone? I didn't." She shoved the paper at me. It was a printout of an email, written in clear English, sent to the State Ministry of Education. Title: Sexual Abuse of a Student at Queen's Unity College, Enugu. And at the bottom, my name. My story, word for word. I looked up at her, stunned. That's when I remembered 3 weeks earlier, I had written everything in my diary and Uju had borrowed it. She had cried when she read it. Uju had sent the email. Or was it the matron? They didn't tell us when the officials would arrive. But when they did, the school gates were swarming. Men and women in suits, clipboards in their hands. Students were summoned. Teachers questioned. The principal paced. And then my name was called. They didn't speak to me in the principal's office. No. They took me to the staff room, sat me down. One of the women looked me straight in the eye. "You are very brave," she said. "Tell us again, from the beginning." And I did, this time in full. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I spoke. And every word felt like I was lifting bricks off my chest. 3 days later, everything changed. During morning assembly, the principal took the mic. His voice was flat, his face pale. "We regret to announce that Senior Judith Ease has been expelled from Queen's Unity College for gross misconduct and violation of student safety policies." A silence fell over the assembly like rain had dropped from the sky. The school didn't say much after the expulsion. They called it an unfortunate incident. Told the press it was being handled internally. But in the town, the story spread like wildfire. Parents pulled their daughters out. A few teachers resigned quietly. And me? My parents pulled me out immediately from the school. They apologized to me for not being attentive enough to notice when they came for visiting day, and they commended my boldness for speaking up. My pastor and his wife took me through counseling sessions, and brick by brick I began to rebuild my self-esteem and faith again. Even though it took everything in me to walk past the stairs that came with telling my story and healing from it. I did. Every single day. Until those stairs slowly faded into quiet admiration. Because in Queen's Unity College, Enugu State, a girl once whispered the truth. And even though no one listened at first, that truth refused to die. And many girls, because of that truth, were saved from reliving the nightmare she went through.